In the spring of 2008, an emergency call brought doctors at a small Austrian hospital face to face with something they could not explain. A young woman lay critically ill, her body showing signs of extreme isolation and long-term neglect. The only person with her was an elderly man who calmly claimed to be a concerned relative. Medical staff were immediately uneasy. The symptoms pointed to a life lived without normal sunlight, movement, or care. When doctors asked for the patient's medical history, the answers did not add up. They requested to speak to the girl's mother. Days later, a woman stepped forward. Her name was Elisabeth Fritzl. What she told investigators would expose a hidden world beneath an ordinary family home and reveal a crime that had lasted nearly a quarter of a century. Elisabeth Fritzl was born on April 6, 1966, and grew up in Amstetten, a quiet town in Lower Austria. From the outside, her family appeared normal. Her father, Josef, was strict, highly controlling, and deeply concerned with rules and authority. He worked in technical sales and later owned several properties. Her mother, Rosemarie, ran the household and placed full trust in her husband. Inside that home, however, Elisabeth's childhood was already unsafe, long before she disappeared. According to later statements, Josef began crossing serious boundaries with Elisabeth when she was still a child. This behavior remained hidden inside the family home, reinforced by fear, silence, and control. Josef was not acting recklessly. He was calculating. He learned how to dominate without attracting attention. As Elisabeth grew older, she tried to build a life away from that environment. After finishing compulsory education at 17, she enrolled in a waitress training program. In January 1983, she ran away from home and hid in Vienna with a coworker. For a short time, she was beyond her father's reach. That freedom lasted less than 3 weeks. Police located her and returned her to her parents in Amstetten. Once back home, Elisabeth resumed her training and completed it in mid-1984. She was offered a job in Linz and was preparing to move out. She had just turned 18. This upcoming independence meant Josef was about to lose control. Years earlier, Josef had already started modifying the basement beneath the family home. What appeared to be ordinary construction work slowly became something else. The house itself dated back to the late 19th century, and Josef later applied for a permit to add an extension with a basement. Inspectors approved the visible structure, but they did not see what was hidden behind the walls. Behind that approved space, Josef illegally excavated a much larger cellar. Around 1981 or 1982, he began turning this concealed area into a sealed chamber. He installed electricity, plumbing, and basic living facilities, including a toilet, wash basin, bed, hot plate, and refrigerator. In 1983, he secretly expanded the space further by cutting a passageway into an older basement section that only he knew existed. The hidden cellar was not a single room. It consisted of a narrow corridor, storage areas, and several small open spaces connected by tight passageways. There was a basic cooking area, bathroom facilities, and 2 sleeping sections fitted with simple beds. Altogether, the space measured about 55 square meters. Access to the chamber was deliberately complicated. Reaching it required passing through multiple locked basement rooms. The main entrance was a low metal door reinforced with concrete and mounted on steel rails. It was hidden behind shelving in Josef's workshop and secured by an electronic code operated through a remote device. In total, 8 doors had to be unlocked to reach the area where Elisabeth and the children were kept. To anyone outside the house, the basement looked ordinary. Nothing suggested what existed behind the walls. The construction blended into routine maintenance and renovation work over several years. By the time the space was finished, it was completely sealed, isolated, and known only to Josef. Only after this point does Elisabeth's confinement begin. In August 1984, Josef told 18-year-old Elisabeth to help him with a task in the cellar. He said they needed to install a door. Once she was inside the space, he used an ether-soaked cloth to make her lose consciousness. When she woke up, she was locked behind the steel door. That moment ended her life above ground and began a captivity that would last 8,516 days. Josef told the family and authorities that Elisabeth had run away. After her disappearance, Rosemarie filed a missing persons report. Almost a month later, Josef provided police with a letter, the first of several he forced Elisabeth to write while she was confined. The letter, mailed from another town, said she was tired of family life, was staying with a friend, and did not want to be found. It warned her parents not to look for her. Josef supported the story by telling police she had likely joined a cult. He continued mailing letters from different locations to make the story seem authentic. Rosemarie believed her daughter had chosen to leave. Authorities accepted the explanation. Social services never searched the house or the cellar. The story was considered closed. Inside the hidden chamber, Elisabeth lived in a small space with low ceilings and artificial light. Josef controlled every aspect of daily life. He decided when the lights were on, when food arrived, and when the door opened. He used constant threats to maintain fear. He told her the door was electrified and claimed poisonous gas would be released if she tried to escape. Investigators later confirmed there was no gas system, but at the time, the threat was enough. Over the years, fear replaced hope. Josef entered the chamber almost every day, sometimes staying overnight. At minimum, he came several times a week, bringing food and supplies. During these visits, he repeatedly violated Elisabeth. This continued for more than 20 years. The basement became a sealed world where time lost meaning and survival depended on obedience. For nearly 5 years, Elisabeth was completely alone in confinement. Then she became pregnant. Over the next 2 decades, she gave birth to 7 children. None of the births involved medical care. There was no hospital, no doctor, and no outside assistance. Elisabeth relied only on basic instructions Josef allowed, and her own ability to adapt. One child, born prematurely, survived only a few days. Josef later disposed of the remains in the basement furnace. There was no burial and no record. The loss was treated as something to hide, just like Elisabeth herself. 3 of the surviving children remained in the cellar with their mother. They grew up without sunlight, fresh air, or contact with the outside world. Their reality was limited to concrete walls and artificial light. Elisabeth taught them to read and write, and tried to create routines to keep them functioning. The other 3 children were removed from the chamber as infants. Josef left them on the family doorstep at different times, claiming Elisabeth had secretly returned and abandoned them. Authorities accepted his explanation. Josef and his wife were approved as foster parents, and the children were raised upstairs as part of the household. Social workers visited regularly and reported no concerns. Upstairs, those children attended school, saw doctors, and lived ordinary lives. Downstairs, their siblings lived in isolation. Elisabeth raised them with limited resources, while Josef controlled everything that entered the space, including food, books, electricity, and contact with the outside world. After the 4th child was born in 1994, Josef expanded the chamber. Elisabeth and the children were forced to dig out soil by hand over several years. The space grew larger, but remained sealed and controlled. They were allowed a television, radio, and video player. Food could be stored and heated, but access depended entirely on Josef's decisions. At times, he punished the family by shutting off the lights or refusing to bring food for days. He reinforced control through fear, repeating threats of electrocution or gas if anyone tried to escape. The door remained locked at all times. According to relatives, Josef entered the basement every morning around 9 o'clock, claiming he was working on technical plans. He often stayed there overnight and did not allow interruptions. A tenant living in the house for years reported hearing noises from below. Josef explained them away as faulty pipes or heating issues. No one pressed further. This routine continued uninterrupted for nearly 24 years, until a medical emergency finally brought outside attention to what was hidden beneath the house. The discovery would expose everything that had been concealed for decades. Beyond this, Josef's ability to avoid suspicion was helped by his past being legally erased. In 1967, years before Elisabeth was born, he had broken into a woman's home and raped her at knife point. He served part of the 18-month sentence. Under Austrian law, That conviction was expunged after 15 years. When social services later checked his background, nothing appeared. There were also other dark questions around Josef. He was investigated as a possible suspect in multiple unsolved murders over the years, including the killing of a teenage girl near a campsite he managed. These cases never resulted in charges due to lack of evidence, but they added to the picture of a man capable of extreme violence. For 24 years, Josef balanced two lives. One was public, controlled, and respectable. The other existed beneath the floor, hidden behind concrete and steel. Elisabeth and the children aged underground. Some of the children never saw the sky. They did not know what cars were or how seasons changed. Their world was defined by Josef's schedule. The routine finally broke in April 2008. Kirsten, the oldest child living underground, became seriously unwell. She lost strength and collapsed. Elisabeth begged Josef to get help. At first, he refused. Days passed, and Kirsten grew worse. Eventually, he agreed to seek medical care, not out of concern, but because the situation could no longer be controlled below ground. On April 19th, Josef unlocked the door and allowed Elisabeth to help carry Kirsten out of the chamber. For the first time in 24 years, Elisabeth stepped outside. She saw daylight, air, and open space. The moment was brief. Josef forced her to return underground while he drove Kirsten to a hospital in Amstetten. Kirsten arrived in critical condition. Doctors diagnosed life-threatening kidney failure. Her body showed signs of long-term neglect. Josef told hospital staff that Kirsten's mother was living in a cult and had abandoned her years earlier. He produced a note he claimed explained everything. The story did not sit right with the medical team. Doctors noticed inconsistencies. Kirsten's condition suggested extreme isolation. The note appeared unnatural. On April 21st, staff alerted police. Authorities reopened the old missing persons case involving Elisabeth. Media appeals were broadcast asking the missing mother to come forward and provide medical history. Elisabeth saw the broadcast on a television in the cellar. She understood that the outside world was asking questions. She pleaded with Josef to let her go to the hospital. He resisted at first, then gave in. On April 26th, he released Elisabeth and her two sons, Stefan and Felix, and brought them upstairs. He told his wife that Elisabeth had decided to come home after 24 years. Later that same day, Josef and Elisabeth went to the hospital. A doctor who had grown suspicious tipped off police. Officers arrived and detained both Josef and Elisabeth on hospital grounds. They were taken separately to a police station. Elisabeth refused to speak until one condition was met. She demanded a guarantee that she would never have to see her father again. Once that promise was made, Elisabeth began to talk. Over the next 2 hours, she described 24 years of confinement. She explained the cellar, the control, the threats, and the children. Investigators listened as a hidden world came into focus. Josef was arrested that night on suspicion of multiple serious crimes. Police searched the house. Josef provided the code to access the concealed door behind shelves in the basement. Officers unlocked door after door until they reached the chamber. The space confirmed Elisabeth's account. The conditions explained everything doctors had seen in Kirsten's body. Elisabeth, her children, and her mother, Rosemarie, were taken into protective care. Rosemarie stated she had no knowledge of what had happened beneath her home. She said Josef controlled the cellar and discouraged questions. Authorities believed she had been unaware. DNA testing confirmed that Josef was the biological father of Elisabeth's children. His lawyer initially argued that more proof was required for some charges. Police revealed letters Elisabeth had been forced to write shortly before discovery, suggesting Josef was planning to stage a fake rescue from a cult. Investigators began interviewing former tenants and neighbors. More details emerged about Josef's strict control of the house. People recalled noises from below. They remembered being told it was pipes or heating. No one had pushed further. Formal charges followed quickly after Josef's arrest. Prosecutors accused him of false imprisonment, coercion, incest, and causing the death of an infant through neglect. The list of charges reflected not one crime, but a system of control that lasted decades. Elisabeth later gave recorded testimony to investigators, but only after receiving a guarantee that she would never have to see her father again. While in custody, Josef began shaping his own version of events. He claimed his actions toward Elisabeth were not criminal, but mutual. He told his lawyer that he knew what he had done was wrong, yet said it became normal to live a second life beneath his house. He rejected the image of himself as a monster and described his behavior as misunderstood. He said he brought flowers, books, and toys into the cellar and acted like a caring parent to the children. Josef insisted that imprisoning Elisabeth was a response to her behavior as a teenager. He claimed she no longer followed rules and that he needed to keep her away from the outside world. He framed his actions as discipline, not abuse. He also suggested that strict ideas about order from his early childhood influenced his thinking. Observers noted these statements closely, as they appeared to be laying the groundwork for a mental incapacity defense. Psychiatric experts examined Josef's background in detail. He gave conflicting accounts of his childhood. At first, he described his mother as strict but fair. Later, he claimed she was violent, emotionally distant, and humiliating. He said he lived in fear of her and felt unloved. Records showed that after Josef married and bought his house, his mother moved in with him. Over time, their roles reversed. He later admitted that he confined her in the attic and sealed the window, telling neighbors she had died. She remained there until her death in 1980. A forensic psychiatric report described Josef as having a severe combined personality disorder. The assessment included deep control issues and a long-standing pattern of manipulation. Experts concluded that the imprisonment of Elisabeth was not about discipline or protection. It was premeditated and driven by personal gratification. The report recommended lifelong psychiatric supervision. Investigators also documented the structure of the underground chamber. The house itself dated back to the late 19th century. Josef had legally applied for a basement extension, then secretly expanded it far beyond what was permitted. Behind concealed walls, he built a hidden complex that only he could access. The space included narrow corridors, storage areas, sleeping spaces, and basic facilities. Access required passing through multiple locked rooms and entering a code hidden behind shelves in the workshop. Every element was designed to prevent discovery. The trial began in March 2009 in the city of St. Pölten. The courtroom was packed with journalists from around the world. On the first day, Josef attempted to shield his face from cameras. After opening statements, the courtroom was closed to the public. Elisabeth's recorded testimony was shown to jurors in segments, as the material was too difficult to view all at once. Josef initially denied responsibility for some charges. After becoming aware that Elisabeth was present in the courtroom, he changed his plea. He admitted guilt on all counts. On March 19, 2009, the court sentenced him to life imprisonment, with a minimum of 15 years before any parole consideration. The Austrian government responded publicly after the verdict. Officials acknowledged failures in oversight and promised institutional reviews. The case triggered international outrage and raised questions about how long-term abuse could remain hidden inside a family home without intervention. Elisabeth and her 6 surviving children entered long-term medical and psychological care. They were kept away from media attention. Doctors helped them adjust to light, open space, and everyday movement. Simple experiences caused distress. Therapy focused on safety, routine, and gradual adaptation. The children raised upstairs struggled with guilt and anger after learning the truth. They had been told their mother abandoned them. Rebuilding trust took time. Slowly, relationships formed between all siblings. Elisabeth later changed her identity and relocated to a remote village. She learned to drive and manage daily tasks. Her focus remained on her children and maintaining a private life. Legal protections kept her location undisclosed. The children grew into adulthood under continued care. Some pursued education. Others focused on emotional recovery. All required ongoing support. The underground chamber was eventually filled with concrete. The house was sold years later. The physical space was erased, but the case remained a permanent reference point in criminal history. Josef remained in prison as his health declined. Courts repeatedly reviewed his detention status. Each decision drew public attention and debate. Elisabeth did not attend parole proceedings. She continued rebuilding her life away from public view. The story ended in court records, but its implications continued long after, leaving lasting questions about secrecy, authority, and how many signs can be overlooked before the truth is finally forced into the open. Thanks for watching. If you have thoughts or questions about this case, share them in the comments, like the video, and subscribe for more crime stories.